Not My Family is a highly fictionalized, loosely autobiographical narrative that describes generational bad will, poor choices, financial malfeasance, and even murder. The generational craziness is propagated like a tidal wave, threatening to drown everything in the deluge. Secrets are buried deep in lies, pacts sealed in blood, the truth concealed unto death, just to exert some control. Personally, I hate rubberneckers. It's kind of like, or this book is kind of like rubbernecking. The 30-mile pileup or 30-car pileup on I-75. You want to look away, but you're drawn to the carnage. Join me as the protagonist progresses along self-discovery and she recreates her identity and she discovers how to go home again. Not My Family can be purchased at FeliciaBaxter.com or directly from the author. Just navigate to Facebook, look up Dale's Angels Inc. and click Buy Now for your autographed copy. Now, let's return to the podcast.
God of glory, Lord of love, hearts unfold like flowers before thee, healthy as the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive our dark down away. Giver of immortality, fill us with the light. Fill us with the light. Oh, fill us with the light of day.
So stay tuned for another episode of TNFro Is Reading. Reading to learn, learning to rewrite her own narrative. Welcome to another episode of TNFro Is Reading. Hi, I'm your host, Felicia Baxter. What we'll be covering today is going over any updates to the Libby's List, whether written word or movies in this case, what's capturing my attention in the news, what I'm reading, as well as my featured tweet or post of the day and my daily affirmations. And then I'll conclude with a bit of advice. BerryLook.com is an online fashion clothing store offering an extensive range of high quality and the latest gorgeous women's clothing at affordable prices with worldwide free shipping. You can navigate to BerryLook.com now and enter in the coupon code AFFS for further discounts as well as for discounted shipping, or you can navigate to Dale'sAngelsInc.com to get this offer as well as to find other specials which are updated daily. Now back to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. BTW, what's in the news? There are other podcasts that focus on negativity, gossip, and rumors. This is not one of those types of casts. This is completely geeky in nature and focused. I mean, come on, it's about what I'm reading. Anyways, thus, an entire section of Dale'sAngelsInc.com is called Nerd Corner. It's completely dedicated to nerdy stuff like pictures from the Hubble spacecraft and space news and other geeky things. But this past week, NASA has announced that it was actually challenged by one of the few things I kind of agree upon with this administration, their push to get a man back on the moon. It's like they're trying to refocus or deflect attention when we were in the space race and when at going back to a time when this administration thinks America was at its greatest. But very concerning with this is because during this time, unemployment was at a new high. Our inner cities were decaying. We hadn't we had just passed the Civil Rights Act after years of American apartheid with Jim Crow laws and the civil unrest secondary to civil rights in this country. But besides all of that, I do agree that we really need to restart the space race. And when they announced that it's going to take about 20 to 30 billion in today's dollars to get back to the moon, I was like, okay, yeah, right. We're not paying for that. But with so much of that agency being privatized, I think and if we keep that price tag down, because anytime you deal with the government, there are always going to be overruns. I think it is possible. With the SpaceX program and a number of other private programs, I do think it's possible because, billionaires, they got money, but they're not going to waste their money. And I'm hopeful that they will have some best practices to keep those costs down. And also this past week, Barnes and Noble, the biggest book retailer in this country, was acquired by a hedge fund called Elliott Advisors for $638 million. They thought this was actually a cheap price for the bookseller. At one point, I think it was well overvalued years ago at $1 or couple of $1 billion. But they said that this move has momentarily calmed fears among publishers and agents that the largest bookstore chain in the United States might collapse after one of the most tumultuous periods in its history. The CEO of Waterstones, James Daunt, also of Daunt Books, will take over as the CEO of Barnes & Noble when this deal is finally inked. Now a word from a hopeful sponsor. Alibris is a premier marketplace for books, music, and movies. Since 1998, it has connected millions of buyers with thousands of independent sellers from across the world. Read more for helpful hints on the best and get the best out of the Alibris experience. In addition, they offer benefits such as 100% satisfaction guaranteed, affordable shipping, sales promotions, gift guides, and personal recommendations, exclusive discount coupons, and more. They have awesome ideas for great gifts, thousands of eligible books, and anywhere from 10 to 80% discounted on those hard to find titles. Navigate to Alibris.com today or navigate to Dale's Angels Inc. to find out and to upload the most up-to-date coupon code to even greater deals. And that's basically it. Now back to the podcast. On my last podcast, and welcome back to the podcast, I actually only added a couple of books to the Libby's list. My Libby's list is the application that public libraries use to allow their patrons to check out electronic forms of books and put them on hold. And I've been adding these books for the past several weeks because there just seems to be so many things that I would like to read. And the list, and it's so wild because last week I only added 2, but this week I just have 50 million books that I've added. And these are in no particular order of importance, but I've added Queen Bee by Dorothea Benton Frank. This book seems like it's going to be one of those types of books if you go to the beach for the weekend with your legs crossed or underneath a umbrella with a mixed drink in your hand, and seems like it's going to be a great read. It is, the way it's described by the New York Times is, immerse yourself in the enchanting world of New York Times bestselling author Dorothea Benton Frank's Carolina Low Country in this evocative tale that returns at long last to her beloved Sullivan's Island. The next book is actually on sale. I think it's $3 on the Kindle store. Inglath Cooper, That Month in Tuscany. Ren Sawyer and Lizzie Harper live completely different lives. He's a rock star with a secret he can no longer live with. She's a regular person whose husband stood her up for a long planned anniversary trip. And then there's Sarah Blake's The Guest Book. It moves through 3 generations and back and forth in time. The Guest Book asks how we remember and what we choose to forget. It shows the untold secrets we inherit and pass on, unknowingly echoing our parents and grandparents. Sarah Blake's triumphant novel tells the story of a family and a country that buries its past in quiet until the present calls forth a reckoning. There's Lisa Wingate, Before We Were Yours, a novel. You'll notice that a lot of these are focused, and I didn't realize they're focused on dysfunctional family and dynamics and relationships. And that's actually the focus of my own book, which I'll be reading from later. But I thought that tone of these editions was remarkable in that they all had to do with families and just crappy late relationships. But anyways, but this book also struck me because this is right here in Tennessee. This book, Before We Were Yours, a novel, is based on one of America's most notorious real-life scandals in which Georgia Tann, director of a Memphis-based adoption organization, kidnapped and sold poor children to wealthy families all over the country. Lisa Wingate's riveting, retching, and ultimately uplifting tale reminds us how, even though the paths we take can lead to many places, the heart never forgets where we belong. Then there is Lou Castamiller's L.E.L. or Lel, The Lost Life and Scandalous Death of Letitia Elizabeth Landon, the celebrated female Byron. A lost 19th century literary life brilliantly rediscovered. Letitia Elizabeth Landon, hailed as the female Byron, she changed English poetry, her novels, short stories, and criticism, like Byron, though in a woman's voice, explored the dark side of sexuality by the acclaimed author of the Bronte myth. The New Yorker called it wonderfully entertaining, spellbinding, and the New York Times Book Review called it ingenuous. And then there is Henry Louis Gates Jr., Stony the Road, Reconstruction, White Supremacy, and the Rise of Jim Crow. This book is described as a profound new rendering of the struggle by African Americans for equality after the Civil War and the violent counter-revolution that resubjugated them, as seen through the prism of war, of images and ideas that have left an enduring racist stain on American minds. Now a word from another hopeful sponsor. Now, welcome back to the podcast. So a few weeks ago, I was listening to the Breakfast Club podcast, and Charlemagne the God, while he was taking a break from a George Jefferson-like rant, mentioned a book called Unlearn, 101 Simple Truths for a Better Life by Humble the Poet. He says this is a great book that you can actually write your daily affirmation and then meditate upon those words. And after that, I started doing that on a daily basis, and I wanted to share a few of those with you guys. One of the ones that I think I'm going to rewrite and meditate on daily is don't count past regrets. Count the years and what you can do in the time you have left. Have aspirations, but stop sabotaging them by inaction or self-doubt. And this also develops something that I want to focus on. It's something called intentional success. Everything you have to do, you do with excellence, and you will be successful. Just focus on the end game or the success of it. If you're truly doing something successful or with excellence, why wouldn't the end product of that action be success? Just think, doing the best, or you are the best at what you're doing, what you will do, it will be successful. Say that over and over again. So the challenge, or what I challenge the audience, is to create, to adapt, and to adapt to live. Survival depends on how you adapt, and creating art helps that. So now another pause for the cause from a hopeful sponsor. So welcome back. So what am I reading? I'm actually reading or rereading my own book. And why do I have to, or why do I write a book, or why do I even do this podcast? Because no one encouraged me, nor did they discourage me from doing this. This book is a book of self-discovery. It doesn't assassinate the characters of the dead. It doesn't do any of that. It doesn't focus the blame. It just brings secrets into focus. And also, it's loosely based on some events of my life, but I did take some poetic license in the creation of the story or the narrative itself. It is simply, I hope, is a work of art and self-expression. So I'm reading from the chapter. It says, "The other shoe drops." Nothing in my life thus far has been normal. For the most part, I have been okay with that. I have learned a certain amount of detachment works with a family with serious generational curse. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to fall because it could be a call that someone has advanced cancer, a young man with so much promise eats his gun in the city park, or someone has a massive stroke but had looked awful for months. What is a generational curse? A curse is the hopeless continuation of emotional pain, bad luck, and general screwed upness wished upon everyone in your immediate circle and continued by any progeny who may happen to be a product of any sexual encounters. The progeny of my mother's family is part of this curse. There are some of the worst kept secret affairs, and in some instances rape. They never had anyone to tell them they are worthy and don't have to accept crap treatment from anyone. Life is about more than surviving. You can make mistakes, but success is all about how fast you pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, and get moving. Darlene Marilyn Butler, my mother. The pictures during our time in Texas were startling. My mother looked happy. What was even more disconcerting being that after Texas, my mother very seldom took pictures. She always had an expression on her face that looked as if she were trying to hide. The carefree woman I saw in the pictures from in South... Where was the carefree woman I saw in the pictures from South Padre Island? I wish I had gotten to know her as an adult. It was as if she stopped being present. She wanted no evidence of the fairy tale life she lived in Texas. The elegant woman in the picture had her hair pulled back in a puffy afro, wore sundresses, and had big floppy hats decorated with flowers. She wore flowery peasant blouses with wicker baskets that were full of flowers from her garden. She had a Tuesday afternoon tea in her flower shop, surrounded by smiling friends and family members. She would bake scones, not well, but it was a lot of fun. She would make her flour deliveries before the heat of the day and then work for several hours in the family's coffee shop. When the afternoon rush was done, she would help close up the shop and get home just in time for my older brothers to get home from school. This woman was calm and collected, but above all, she was happy. There were many pictures of my parents' nights out in Dallas. In all those pictures, my family was dressed up like they were going to Studio 54. There were a lot of silk dresses and open collars. There were many pictures of my parents boogieing down. They had date night in Houston or Dallas just for the fun of it. They would stay overnight and come back to be with the family for the rest of the weekend. Saturdays were family days with games, barbecues, laundry, and house cleaning. On Sundays, we would have family breakfast, Sunday school, and church, and we would go home for Sunday dinner. There was always extra guests, but it was a cacophony of love, laughter, and enjoyment. My mother's home life in Virginia was awful or horrible. She never really had a childhood, and she was a live-in maid and cook for her younger siblings by the age of 6. I heard stories about the burns she sustained while trying to cook, while standing on a chair because she was too short to reach the stove. She stole money from her father to buy feminine hygiene products and suffered beatings for it. She went hungry to make sure the beans and hot dogs fed her siblings, so they would have at least one meal per day. What might have sealed my mother's fate was when the decision was made to hold she and Myrtle out of school and make it seem if Angela was Darlene's child and not Myrtle. The life that was chosen for her in Virginia was devoid of joy, love, and respect. In South Padre, she was larger than life, confident, secure, and loved. In the pictures, I saw that same joy and love with all of us being born. It was obvious that we were all loved. There was a look of wonder on all of our faces. I saw the death notice, and there were no more pictures of my family or my Texas family after that. Soon after the funeral for my twin brothers, Darlene's family descended from Virginia, picked up my mother and me, drove us back to Virginia. In my grandma's M's words, they arrived like a bunch of buzzards, circling a dead carcass or a dying carcass. My father sank into a deep depression for almost 2 years. He had the support of his family, which was loving and caring, and they were able to give him that support without any nonsense. They did not make the pain any worse. Darlene would go into survival mode for the rest of her life. She put her head down and just did life. She guarded her heart and couldn't bring herself to love anyone that much again. My biological father continued to write her several times a month over the years. We saw some of the open letters. When she married Ronald, she stopped opening the letters. Most were bound by rubber bands and sealed away. Tony would only learn that my mother had succumbed to metastatic breast cancer after several letters were returned. Fear of happily ever after. My father loved his children and his family and friends, but he never remarried. He told me he was waiting for Darlene and me to return. When my brothers died, a part of him died too. His love for my mother and me never waned. He told me how my mother blamed herself for the twins' death, and she always felt she didn't deserve that much happiness. When she ran back to Virginia, she felt like she was supposed to be punished for all that happiness. She ran back to Virginia because it was easier to return to what she was used to. She just wanted to avoid being hurt again. When she left Texas, she gave up so much to live with the man who made her feel she deserved to be cheated on. He spread sexually transmitted diseases, and he thought it was okay because he kept the lights on. I found out that the child support that Tony Purcell paid for 25 years supported all of them and us, really. Ronald Butler was a spiritually bankrupt individual with a tragic past. He had been abused severely by his own mother, but that didn't excuse how he treated my mother and me. Dysfunction begets dysfunction. Her inheritance was instability and insanity. The family did have a sixth sense or perception, but they never could harness it or use that gift for good. They could be charismatic, but they used it as part of a scam or a ghetto Ponzi scheme. And this, although harsh look on this particular family, is just the reality of it all. There was horrible decisions made, and people had to live until their death with some of these poor decisions. And I wanted to take up from there to read a continuation of this tragic hero or protagonist, Darlene Butler, because this is how I wrote her. How I found out that I was not really or the character Franny found out that she wasn't really a butler was through genetics and 23andMe. But it was also through that research that we found out that Darlene is the next book. We found out that Darlene is a child of a prostitute in one of the only whorehouses in Virginia at the time. And it starts out as we all created and submitted DNA to create the family tree on familytree.org. A birth certificate popped up, and my siblings and I blogged and spoke about all of our discoveries. My sister Mara's association with Ancestry and 23andMe, and my discovery of my genealogical history spoke to people just like the family gatherings, attracted customers to the family shops and bed and breakfast. And it seemed to have spoke to a gentleman in Savannah, Georgia, by the name of Rob Astor. Rob was going to be in Houston on some business, and he wanted to meet and to chat. Of course, we all wanted to know what he was contacting us about, but it seemed to be kind of heavy and grave because he didn't want to speak about it on the phone. Of course, my cop older brothers ran a check on him, and it was weird. He said it came back that he was 69, but the date of birth was 3 years after that. He served in the military, no criminal record, and there was multiple sibling matches on the site. And he also spoke that he was actually adopted when he was a little bit of an older child. In this cafe, we would meet up in a cafe in Houston, and he spoke of the unexpected genetic match between both Bryce and I to him and his sister. The genetics revealed that we all had autosomal hits through our mothers. Nerd speak, we were all related through our mother. And I was like, okay. And the shots kept coming. Evidently, Dorothy Mae Jones was a picker who ran away at the age of 13, and she ended up in a whorehouse in Pungo of Virginia Beach. That's now Virginia Beach. The pimp, who lived up until the ripe old age of 87, was the father of not only this gentleman, Mr. Astor, and his sister, but had also was father of multiple children. But with this close genetic match that revealed that they were more than likely our aunts and uncles, it stood to reason that that match was between our mother, Darlene. So what we mean is Darlene is your sister. Wait, what in the crabtree hell is going on here? And it became so that every time he would speak, he would reveal an even sinister and horrible plot to the story that gave me the willies, and the hairs on the back of my neck and arms would just stand up on end. He would go on to tell the story of depravity and punishment. And the beginnings of Darlene was a little bit more less than happy, and why Sarah thought that she could easily be sacrificed because she was so marginalized. We would go on to meet, and I would also have gone on to create an extended family from those children that were born in the whorehouse. And I hope you will pay attention or stay tuned to the next episode, so I'll actually be able to reveal more as I create this crazy extended family. Welcome back to the podcast. Now for the featured tweet or statement of the day. And it comes from the feature image of this week's podcast. And it says, "The world without art is just meh." And that's true. And that's it for this week's episode of What is TNFro Reading. Join me next time for another addition to the podcasting world. And don't forget to become a patron and buy my book. You can navigate to patreon.podbean.com/The Talking Fro to donate to become a paid patron to the podcast, or you can navigate to www.feliciabaxter.com to purchase the book. Now, always remember, be kind, be present, just don't be stupid. Thanks for listening. Until next time.